The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting groups. If you'd like to produce a show, call us at 260-421-1250.
Let me be your lighthouse so I can show you the way. Let me be your shining light, I'll keep you from drifting away. I'm the one that makes you try when...
This is Nancy Valko. She is a spokesperson for Nurses for Life. What other title do you have, dear?
Well, I'm also a legal nurse consultant, and I've worked for, as of this year, 50 years in nursing, mostly in critical care, but in burns, hospice, home health, dialysis, just about every place you could work at with some of the most difficult patients. And that's what I preferred. I wanted to take care of people who really needed good care.
And what are you doing now? Are you retired or?
Well, I'm kind of semi-retired. I do volunteer work, and I do travel a lot of times, particularly recently, mostly to help defeat assisted suicide bills throughout the United States. But I also have a blog that I write, and it's called A Nurse's Perspective on Life, Healthcare, and Ethics.
Right.
Because I've been working in that for a long time, and I cover pretty much all the ethics issues from abortion to assisted suicide. And I write on those things, usually with things that are new, because I do a lot of medical research. I write for journals, and I've been a reporter for the National Catholic Register. I was co-chair of the St. Louis Archdiocesan Pro-Life Committee, and with the volunteer work and the writing and taking care of my newborn baby granddaughter.
You got a newborn?
It's been a wonderful life.
A newborn girl?
Well, kind of newborn. She won't. I really shouldn't say that because she'll be 2 next month.
Oh, 2. Well, you know.
She's still my baby, and she's my first hands-on grandchild. And so we are just delighted with that. So I keep very busy, and I was just on a conference call with the National Association of Pro-Life Nurses, educate nurses and bring them in to be more active in the pro-life movement.
So,
most nurses really want to help people, and we talk about the things that don't help people. And we even provide a scholarship for pro-life student nurses to the school that they're going to. We're really trying to promote the whole pro-life attitude. I was once called by Ladies' Home Journal for an interview. This was several years ago, when Ladies' Home Journal was still around, and they said, oh, so you're with that anti-abortion nurses group?
yeah.
And I said, no. And they go, what, did we get the wrong number? I said, no. We are an association of nurses who want the very best and excellent patient care for all patients, and that's why we're against such a thing as abortion, infanticide, and euthanasia. She goes, oh, okay. But it's much broader than that. We cover a lot of stuff. On my blog, it's mostly medical issues. I have some tips on taking medication and stories. A lot of it is stories. And I'm hoping to help people that way. And like I said, I do a lot of research, and having been a newspaper reporter, I work very hard on sourcing my material. But there's stuff going on all the time. You almost can't keep up with it.
Well, you say you have your own blog. It's online then, right?
It's online, and it comes out about every week or two, and it's at www.nancy, V as in Victor, ALKO, one word, .com. And it's free, and you can comment on it or share it with anyone that you like. But I've had an amazing life, and and actually I've had something in my life that has touched on every single pro-life issue. There is. I've had personal or professional experience with all of it. And I'm hoping by sharing that, it will help people to understand exactly what we're fighting and what we're fighting for, which is the best health care for everyone.
Now, something happened in your family that made you...
Okay.
What happened to your daughter many
My
months ago?
daughter? Well, I've actually lost two daughters. One I lost in 1983, and she was what got me into the pro-life movement.
Oh.
Because I was a young ICU nurse working in what's now a level 1 trauma unit, and loved it. We worked so well together, the doctors and nurses, and we were all on the same page ethically. And when Roe versus Wade came down, they started talking about it, and they said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think it's terrible." And immediately, people were yelling, "No, what if you were raped?" And it's only for the first 3 months of pregnancy and blah, blah, blah. And that's when I first found out I was politically incorrect. But I did not join the pro-life movement for several years because of one thing they said. They said that legalizing abortion would lead to legalizing euthanasia, the killing of born people. And I thought that was ridiculous, particularly as a nurse working in a very ethical environment. So what happened was I was pregnant with my third child when the newspapers came out with the Baby Doe story in Indiana. This was 1982. And it was a shocking story where parents had refused a simple surgery for their child born with Down syndrome called Baby Doe. And they did it because he had the Down syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
And before that, these cases, if they ever went to court, were always resolved in favor of saving the life of the baby. And my husband, my late husband at the time, he was a doctor and I was a nurse, and he suggested that maybe we try to adopt Baby Doe. He was shocked too, but the family refused all offers of adoption. At the time, I was pregnant with my third child, and one of my friends said, "Well, what if you had a baby with Down syndrome?" And I said, "Well, of course I'd operate. I'd save his or her life." And my friend said, "You don't know and you can't say until you've been there."
Oh, man.
Well, a few months after Baby Doe died horribly from starvation and dehydration while his case was being appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, I had a beautiful little girl named Karen who was born with Down syndrome and with what was thought to be an inoperable heart defect at the beginning, which turned out not to be, and which was a shock, of course. But what really shocked me was when I went to the cardiologist, the heart doctor for my daughter, and he said, "Oh, she looks pretty good. Let me do some more tests." And he said, "Well, even though it's a big heart defect," he said, "she has an 80 to 90% chance of survival with one open heart surgery." And I went, "Oh, that's so wonderful." But then he said, "But I'll do whatever you want." I said, "What do you mean?" And he meant if we decided to let her die by not operating. And I was just incensed. I finally understood what the pro-lifers were talking about. And I yelled at him. I said, "You're offering me a 4th trimester abortion." And he immediately said, "Well, I'll do whatever you want." But he had destroyed my trust in him. I said, "My daughter, her Down syndrome is irrelevant to any medical condition. She must be treated exactly the same as any other baby with the same condition."
Right.
And but I found out sometimes choice doesn't work, because when Karen was 4 months old, she got pneumonia and was hospitalized. And I was tipped off by someone at the doctors at the hospital who said that my doctor, who knew exactly what I wanted, my pediatrician, had made my daughter a do not resuscitate against my express wishes. And I was shocked, and I said, "Why would she do that?" And the person who took this off said it was because she felt I was, quote, too emotionally involved with that retarded baby, unquote. And then I realized how easily choice turns to no choice.
I don't
Once you
understand.
allow that kind of choice. And that got me into the pro-life and disability movements, and I've been writing and speaking ever since.
You've been doing good, too. I'm proud of
You were
you.
saying about my daughter who died. I did have another daughter who died, and she died 10 years ago at the age of 30.
Oh,
And my Marie was a wonderful young woman who did well, but at 14 got into a situation and started trying drugs. And for 16 years we battled to save her. And she would at times get suicidal And then one day she called and she said, Mom, I know how to do it. I said, what do you mean? And she was in therapy at the time. And she said she had gone to the internet and visited the assisted suicide and suicide websites, which for any parent out there, I searched it, and it's pretty shocking what you can find. And what she did, she said, I read the book, Final Exit by Derek Humphrey, who was one of the big heads of the assisted suicide movement, who believes that it should be an option for pretty much anybody who's competent. And he wrote this book about how to kill yourself while he was fighting to change the laws. And she said, I read it, I know how to do it. And I said, oh, this is a terrible book. I said, you know better than that, too. And you can't do that. And your daughter. And she said, yeah, I know, but maybe my daughter would be better off without me. And I feel like I'm a burden to you and the family. And I told her no, and we got her into more help, and she looked like she was okay. And then one day I got a phone call that they had found her body in a motel. And it was just devastating because we had saved her so many times. And then I was told by a detective who was investigating the case, she said, the medical examiner said something funny I don't understand. I said, what did he say? She said he called her death, the technique she used, textbook final exit. She said, I don't know what that means. I said, well, let me tell you what it means. I was just devastated. And that's what happened. And when we got the autopsy results, I couldn't know for sure till I got the autopsy results. We thought she had overdosed. She had not. Her death was neither peaceful nor dignified. It was a horrible kind of death. And we lost her, but I wrote an article and started talking about it. I said, my daughter is a victim of the assisted suicide movement. And over the years, the 50 years that I've been working, I've worked with a lot of suicidal people, including some terminally ill ones. And Marie was the only one I know I ever lost, which was just so tragic. But by telling her story, we saved so many other people. But the suicide contagion thing is really true. When Marie committed suicide, 2 people close to her also became suicidal.
Oh, no.
And we saved them. But once you start putting out that suicide can be a solution to problems, we're in trouble. And we've noticed that the suicide rate in the U.S. was declining until the late 90s. And now it's skyrocketing.
Why?
And that's interesting because in the late 90s is when Oregon started implementing the first assisted suicide law in the United States. Now we have an epidemic of suicide, and as you know, everybody knows an opioid epidemic. And there are a lot of papers thinking that many of these opioid overdose deaths were really suicides, not overdoses per se. So it's a huge problem. It has totally affected the medical and nursing organizations. We just recently had our American Nursing Association come out with a draft position paper approving of, they don't call it assisted suicide anymore. They call it aid in dying.
Oh, that's not right either.
It's just horrific. And I wrote a blog on that.
Yeah.
And along with other nurses associations, and many of us wrote in, we think they'll probably do it. But they were talking to be involved, and if they can't, they can get out of it if they have moral concerns or something like that. But only if they find another willing person to do it, another willing nurse, which is outrageous. And they said when taking care of these people, we cannot have any judgmental thoughts or actions. We have to be neutral in all discussions, that every patient needs all information. And this is just outrageous. This is going to, and it has been a goal for a long time, is to get pro-life nurses out of nursing. Our conscience rights are not very good, and that's one thing we do at NAPN is we try to help nurses whose conscience rights are being violated wherever it is. And it's really hard. Even though we're a small organization, we do what we can. And I work with some of the big pro-life law groups, and I refer people there too. But I've been getting letters from student nurses. One just broke my heart. She said, I'm getting ready money to put in my next payment for my next semester, but now I'm wondering, is there anywhere I can work where my ethics won't be challenged? That was hard. It used to be that if you stayed out of labor and delivery, you could not be involved with abortion. But that didn't work. And we've had nurses who they fired and went to court and finally got their jobs back for refusing to participate in abortion. And we found it at the end of life. In fact, I was almost terminated when I took care of a man who was 72 who had a routine surgery. But all of a sudden his blood pressure and everything went wacky. So we did everything we could for him, stabilized him. He was on a ventilator and doing really well. So we were getting ready to take him off the ventilator. And before that, we take them off the sedation we use to keep them from fighting the ventilator, which can really make it harder for them to recover. And we took him off the sedation medicine, but 24 hours later, he was still not awake. So they called in a neurologist who the other nurses said called him brain dead. I said, he's not brain dead. So there's problems with brain dead, but he even breathes off the ventilator. And they said, well, it's probably close enough. And the next thing I knew when I came in, the man had had the ventilator removed, no oxygen, nothing. And he was on a morphine drip because he kept breathing while he was off the ventilator.
Someone tell me why doctors seem to have this thing of wanting to control someone's living or dying.
Well, many of them, they think they're doing it for altruistic reasons. You know, they go, well, and I said, this is what's so interesting. It's such a small step to go from, I wouldn't want to live like that, to no one should have to live like that. And they were very concerned about the family at the bedside and all this other stuff. The interesting thing with this guy is when I came in, the nurse said, I've increased the morphine to 30 milligrams an hour. This was on someone who had no pain, was showing absolutely no pain. And the nurse told me, the doctor said to keep increasing the morphine until he stops breathing.
Well, that's not right. That's killing him.
I said, absolutely not. And there was no other nurse to take over for me. The other nurse hadn't shown up, so I had everybody, including 2 people on ventilators. One that we were very careful with because she was going to be weaned off her ventilator the next day. And she was off sedation and having pain. And I called the doctor and I said, can I give her just a little 1 milligram of morphine? She's really uncomfortable. And the doctor screamed at me, what are you trying to do, kill her? And I thought, isn't that ironic? I've got a guy here on 30 milligrams of morphine. Well, I turned it off. I went up the chain of command. I talked to the doctor who did the surgery, and he goes, well, I don't want to get involved. And I went to the supervisor who said, oh, this is just comfort care. All we're doing is preventing pain. This is a normal oncology dose, cancer dose. I said, no, it isn't. And I worked oncology for 7 years. And I refused to do it. I turned it off, and we kept trying to wake the man up. And I went home, and people were mad at me. And I came back 2 days later, and he was dead. But the family, when he had first had a problem, asked that if he died, they wanted an autopsy. So I was called into the office of the supervisor, and they said, the doctor wants you terminated, fired, because of what you did. And I said, I did nothing wrong, and I went up the chain of command. And they said, well, no, we know you're a good nurse. How about if we just reprimand you? And I said, no. And at the time, I was a single parent with 3 kids, so I knew what I was giving up, and I thought, I just can't do this. So I said, no, I won't accept a reprimand. And then they said, well, how about if we just say we educated you on end-of-life issues? And I said, I lecture on that all over. No, I won't accept that either. They said, well, go ahead, we'll try to figure out something. So I assumed I'd be harassed out of the job. But instead, nurses on another floor heard about it, and they said, you made us think. Doctors are ordering stuff like that on their patients. And one doctor ordered this big dose of morphine on a man with breathing problems. And the nurses all said, hell no, we won't give it. You give it. The doctor said, I'm not giving it. And my friend told me eventually that was totally stopped. You never saw that again on that floor. So that was pretty interesting. The latest irony was the man did have an autopsy, and I went to his doctor, the one that kind of played Pontius Pilate, when I said, hey, you're trying to kill him in here. And I said, what did the autopsy show? And they said, he told me the autopsy showed no brain damage, no lethal condition. They don't know what he died of. I do. It was from the morphine. But he had no problem and no problem with his brain. And after that, that doctor has become one of my biggest supporters.
I don't understand.
This is the kind of stuff that we're dealing with. And I'm writing a blog now on a Belgian nurse that was in palliative care in Belgium, where they've had euthanasia since 2002. And a doctor came in and thought this guy needed to die, gave him an injection, but he didn't die. So they had to call him back to give another injection. And she started laughing. And then she goes, "Oh my God, what are we doing here?" And she realized what was going on. She said, "I can't do this." And she said, "We just take it for granted." And she said, in Belgium, the doctors went from first do no harm, which is the Hippocratic Oath, to first relieve all suffering. And once they did that, it was real easy for them to do it.
That was an open
Even
door.
on people who had not requested it. And she wound up going to Paris. She said, "I have to go to somewhere where we give really good palliative care and hospice care, where we take care of the needs of the patients. We don't kill them."
What happened to morals here? Where'd they go?
Well, it's scary out there, and Compassion and Choices is the big group now. It started out as the Euthanasia Society of America back like in the 40s when they were trying to get legalized lethal overdoses.
Hemlock
but
Society?
It didn't really go anywhere. And it didn't really go anywhere until the Karen Quinlan case, where a woman, that young girl who was considered in the so-called vegetative state, I hate that term,
Yeah, I heard
in
about that.
1976, and her parents said, "Well, we want to take her off the ventilator so she could die." And it caused a big stir, and the judge finally said, "Yes, you can take her off the ventilator." However, Karen lived for 10 more years off the ventilator. She kept breathing. No one gave her morphine, so she kept breathing.
Yeah.
But that case got them interested, and there was the Society for the Right to Die, and they came up with something called the living will. So beforehand, you can say that you don't want any DNR ventilators or anything like that ahead of time, so you don't end up like Karen Quinlan. And the other thing with Karen Quinlan is they didn't take out her feeding tube. That's another reason why she lived. So they were pushing these living wills everywhere, and California had the first one. They were all over.
Wow, it's
and
California.
I live in Missouri. And they said, "Oh, you're going to be getting a living will." And I looked at it, and it said, well, if I'm imminently dying, I just don't want heroic measures. And I was working with the Archdiocese, and they said, "Well, that sounds pretty good." I said, "No, you don't understand. They're taking feeding tubes out in the Northeast." I gave them the cases because I always do my research. And I said, "That's what they're going for." And they go, "Oh, well, we'll talk to them." So they talked to the Society for the Right to Die, who then said, "Okay, that's not what we're going for. And to show you, we are going to put a provision in that says food and water is among the kinds of care that cannot be removed." I said, "Don't fall for that." And they said, "Well, but doesn't that solve the problem?" I said, "No, you don't understand where this is going." I was reading their stuff. I read more stuff on the other side than I do on ours, to tell you the truth. So it passed, and immediately they came out with a surrogate bill where families could make the decision. And I said, "You are going to have a food and water case here in 6 months." And sure enough, we did. The Nancy Cruzan case came in Missouri, where parents of the woman who was supposedly in a vegetative state after a car accident got her divorced. How that happened was very odd. And then they petitioned to have her feeding tube removed. And the case went up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And Missouri had put in, because people like me were complaining, they put in that nothing could be removed without clear and convincing evidence, and there was none. So the Supreme Court said, "No, that's okay if you need clear and convincing evidence." To me, that was a death sentence, because anything with a judge that's sympathetic can be called clear and convincing. So I knew Nancy was doomed. She came back to St. Louis. The family petitioned again, and our Missouri Attorney General was so beat up by the Right to Die movement, he just didn't get involved. And they found 3 former work people with Nancy who said that, actually, it was very weird. they had worked with her at a home where a 3-year-old was drinking out of a bottle. It was for people who were mentally challenged, and they said, oh, we think she said something like she wouldn't want to live like that. They're talking about a baby bottle,
What?
3-year-old. And the judge said that was clear and convincing evidence, and it took her 12 days to die.
Well, that.
So I saw what was happening, and now it kind of morphed. Then they went on to assisted suicide, and now the big group is Compassion and Choices, headed by a nurse, Barbara Coombs Lee, who lived in Oregon. And I remember in '94, I was asked to come to Colorado because they had a bill up there, and they said, we think it's going to pass. And I read the bill, because I've been studying constitutional law since 1977 on my own.
Yeah.
I am as fascinated by the law as I am by medicine. And I went up there and talked to a bunch of people, but most importantly, I talked to the legislators and told them what the bill said, and it wound up getting defeated. So then they tried in Oregon, and it passed by an initiative. That's sometimes where they go instead of just putting it through the legislature and then having the governor sign it into law. Mm-hmm. They have ballot initiatives. And they squeaked through with a win, but that was challenged, particularly since the drugs are Schedule I narcotics. And it went back up to the court. And they had another initiative where it passed by a slim margin. And so Oregon got assisted suicide, but they didn't get it until the Oregon Medical Society changed their position from opposing it to neutral. And so Compassion and Choices since then has been really focusing on medical and nursing groups, because if they get us, then it'll go through. And Barbara Coombs Lee has even said, she's the head of Compassion and Choices and a nurse herself, she has even said that if doctors and nurses have problems with this, they should perhaps consider another profession if they don't want to do what the patient wants.
You know, we have to stop here because we're going to do another show with you, a continuation of what we're talking about, because we're at the end of our first show. Thank you, Nancy Valko. We'll see you next week. This is Patty Hunter. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty.
Godspeed, my love, until we meet again. You're always in my heart and every dream. Don't let this time apart give in to all our fears. God will keep us close from up above. So until we meet again, Godspeed, my love. God is with us always, for the rest of our lives.